Shalom, I'm filming this before the holiday of Shavuot, and I wanted to talk to you about one of the most serious issues in religion that divides a lot of the Western religion groups, and that is the authorship of the Bible. I have some other videos on this, but I wanted to give you kind of an update and personal perspective. The reason why I do this before Shavuot is because the rabbinic theme of Shavuot is Zman Matan Toratenu, the time of the giving of the Torah. And the question of what does it mean exactly, what was given, if anything was given, is a very important and substantial question. There are groups both in Christianity and Islam, and especially Judaism, that believe that the authorship of the Holy Scriptures, and in the Jewish case the Torah, come from God directly to the chief prophet. So in our case it would be to Moses. And we believe, as it says in Numbers 12, that Moses alone God spoke to mouth, word for word. Now, among Jewish groups, there's a variety of opinions, all the way from the secular humanists and reconstructionists who believe the Torah is completely written from human beings, to a more orthodox approach, which would say either that Moses wrote the Torah during the 40 years in the wilderness, or it was completely dictated by God at Sinai. The Talmud does say the last 8 verses were written by Joshua because Moses was dead already in those last 8 verses of Deuteronomy. So I'll just tell you my story. I went to an Orthodox day school as a child, and then when I attended college at the University of Chicago, my sophomore year, I took a course in Literature of Ancient Israel in a divinity school. Now, it was a course in the Hebrew Bible, and I thought I knew the Bible, so it would be an easy course. But little did I know. I walked into class, and everybody else was a graduate student in religion, and I was this college sophomore. And the Old Testament professor, remember J. Wilcoxon, a Presbyterian, began talking about JEPD. So what is JPD? JEPD? Well, those are the initials for 4 different strands, which he suggested were the major composite documents that made up the Torah, and that some redactor at a later point wove them together. And that explains a lot of the inaccuracies in the Torah, duplicative narratives. For example, if you compare Genesis 1 to Genesis 2, you see opposite facts. You see the different names of God. The style is different. The book of Deuteronomy said it was written last. And as I was listening to this, I was completely flabbergasted. It went against everything that I had heard growing up, and I thought it was heresy. In fact, it is heresy from an Orthodox perspective. You cannot say that and have a job in the Bible department at Yeshiva University. Well, after class, I was stunned, and I went over to the local conservative synagogue, which happened to house the Orthodox day school that I went to as a child. And I bumped into the Orthodox rabbi principal, and I told him what I had just heard. And he said, well, that's anti-Semitism. We've known about this for thousands of years. This theory was developed in Germany actually in 1815, but we have dealt with the verses which they contend were written by other people since the beginning of rabbinic exegesis. So it's all nonsense and don't pay any attention to it. Well, I figured there might be something more, so I ran to the conservative rabbi of the synagogue, a distinguished past president of the Rabbinical Assembly, and I said to him what I had just heard in these 2 conversations, and he said, well, Professor Wilcoxon of the University of Chicago is a good friend. He lectures here from time to time, and we disagree on some of the particulars and verses, but essentially what he said is the basis of the Bible department of the Jewish Theological Seminary where you want to go to rabbinical school. So I said, well then, what about the mitzvot? What's the authorship of the Torah? What's the basis of Jewish life? And I had remembered reading a quote from Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, a great neo-Orthodox rabbi and scholar of the 19th century, who said, when the Torah says, God said to Moses saying blank, either it's true or it's not true. If it's not true, then the whole thing's a joke. If it is true, you have to do it. I said, what do you say about that? So he gave me a pile of books to read. We Have Reason to Believe by Rabbi Louis Jacobs and other books. And I spent a lot of time, in fact, did my senior thesis on that question of the authorship and the impact it had on Jewish law and life. And there's a variety of views in the conservative movement about it, all the way from, as I said, that the book is completely human written, to the idea that it was written by human beings, but with the divine inspiration, that God is behind it. And that's what I believe. It's such a magnificent text, and it has such formed the basis of all of Western civilization, it's possible to believe it was completely written by human beings. But of course, as you study the literature of the ancient Near East and you see other societies, the Akkadians, the Eucharitics, you see the influences, the Hittites, of other texts. What's phenomenal about the Torah, though, is the changes that it made, the stories it tells, and the laws that it establishes for all humanity and for all of life. So on the eve of Shavuot, when we talk about the anniversary of the giving of the Torah, and even in conservative synagogues, as we hold up the Torah and we say, Zod HaTorah Asher, that this is the Torah that God gave to Moses, we have a different and deeper understanding. And this is really a serious issue between, not lay people probably don't care much about this, but it's a very serious issue between the various elements of religious life. Those Christians who would say it's heresy to say that any word of the New Testament was not directly from God, all the way to more liberal Christians who have color-coded Bibles that say this word came from God, and this word was this age, and this word was this age. And it's a common theme in the study of religion. So I wanted to share that with you as just kind of a thought-provoking topic on the eve of Shavuot to help us all analyze and figure out what does the Torah mean to us. And bottom line, I just want to leave you with this thought. The Constitution of the United States is something that we all venerate as Americans, I hope. And we know who wrote it, and we know it was written about 200 years ago, or plus a little bit. And it was written by human beings, but it's a magnificent document. It had to be amended, and it has to be interpreted, but it's the most powerful thing in American life. So just multiply that by 20 times, as old as the Torah is, and the way that that's been venerated by the Jewish people for 4,000 years, you get a sense of the depth of commitment and love that we have for the Torah, which we celebrate on Shavuot, even if we wonder which word exactly was written by whom, when. Shalom.